Welcome to Founders and Funders and this session on investing in the sustainable future. Today we'll hear different perspectives on sustainability and impact, and my name is Dr. Christa Koning. With me I have Dr. Tom Wetzer, who will be my co-host today. We are very excited to be here with you today. So due to last year's success on a purposeful innovation, this is the second time that we're collaborating with Saïd Business School and their events team here at the University of Oxford. We are grateful to all our partners that make this possible: Enterprising Oxford, the Entrepreneurship Center, Woodham College, and especially as well the SBS events team, Tiffany, Amber, Tom, Ross, James. Thank you for making this possible. To those of you who are new, welcome. And to those of you who have joined Founders and Funders before, welcome back. We're very glad that you enjoyed it and are here with us today. Very briefly about Founders and Funders. It's an Oxford community that bridges the gap between science and business, that supports entrepreneurial ambition, that makes science and technology relevant to society in meaningful ways. Today we present to you an all-star panel. We've got Carlotta Saporito, Head of Global Impact Investing at JP Morgan Private Bank, previously at the African Development Bank, where she invested in fund managers across Africa. And for those of you who just concluded the GoTo project in the MBA program, I think you're all too familiar with this. Then we have Henry Lane Fox, co-founder and CEO of Founders Factory, serial entrepreneur and Woodham College alumnus. He's also a general partner at Planet Fund and has a deep experience in building and scaling technology startups. And then we have Matthieu Flamini, co-founder and CEO of GF Biochemicals. And those of you who might think, hang on, I know this guy from somewhere. He's also been a professional football player and played at AC Milan, Olympique de Marseille, and Arsenal. So hold your questions on the derby tonight, and maybe you get lucky and you might answer one or two. So we will hand over to the speakers to briefly introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what impact and sustainability means to them. We'll start with Carlotta, and we will go to Henry, and then to Matthieu. Carlotta, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and what impact and sustainability means to you.
Yes, hi Chris, and hi everyone joining online. It's great to be here. So my name is Carlotta. I head impact investing at JP Morgan Private Bank. And what we do is invest our clients' capital into funds that have the objective of delivering attractive private equity returns, in addition to also delivering positive environmental and social outcomes across three themes, really. One is climate solutions, and then health and wellness and inclusive growth, even though obviously there is quite a lot of overlap between those three, given the impact that climate change is obviously having on things like land access and access to opportunities more broadly. What that means in practice, what is it that we do, is that these are areas where there is an enormous amount of potential. There is great investors out there, great businesses, and incredible talent. And so the question is, how do you find them? And so we speak to hundreds of teams, diligence their processes, evaluate their strategies against their track record. They assess the networks, the value that they bring to businesses. And then we apply an additional layer of due diligence to test the impact thesis. So what is the strategy? What are the processes that they use to generate the positive social and environmental outcomes that we're talking about? And then I think that there is another part of my job that is becoming increasingly important, and that is storytelling. And the reason why I say this is really two reasons. The first one is that impact investing has had a huge amount of attention recently, as we all know, as the audience knows. And various terms have been confused and conflated and politicized. And in a way that's good, as it speaks to the growth of the industry, the maturation of the industry, something that is more on people's mind today. But, so bringing clarity to that discussion in terms of saying, what is ESG? What is impact? What is sustainability broadly? What do we mean by these terms? How do we implement the strategies? And that's becoming key. And the reason why it's so key today is that I think we are at a critical juncture where, and an inflection point almost, where we see some of the most important and significant challenges today also aligning with some of the greatest growth themes that we see. And the second aspect is also that, I think we as capital allocators in the impact space haven't always done as good of a job as we could have to dispel this myth that there is some sort of trade-off between profit and purpose. And sometimes impact has been associated with this moralistic argument about where capital should be allocated as opposed to where it is smart to allocate capital. And so as a result of that, commercial capital allocators have traditionally been quite reluctant to enter the space. Now that story is finally changing. We see that the returns are telling a story that not only profit and purpose are no longer at odds, but in fact, purpose becomes an additional layer of value creation that allows businesses to get on course for sustainable long-term growth. So behind the analytical frameworks, I think that there is also increasingly more and more storytelling. So that's about me.
Thank you, Carlotta. Henry, over to you. If you could briefly introduce yourself and very, very briefly mention what does impact and sustainability mean to you, and how do you link that to your work?
Fantastic. Thank you very much for having me. First off, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Henry Lane Fox. I've been operating and investing in 2 very early stage startups for the last 25 years. I run a company called Founders Factory, which is a venture studio accelerator and offers vertical venture funds focused on many different industries. But we have a very large investment thesis around sustainability and impact. What does that mean for us? That means technologies that are here to make positive change to the planet and society. We operate from London and across Europe now into Africa and into North America. I have long had what I would describe myself as a science groupie. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a technologist, but I've been fortunate to build a large amount of early stage teams very focused on applying technology to solve hard problems. And I think we're at this wonderful inflection point at the moment where science and technology have come together in a way that we haven't really seen in the past, and have an ability now to scale solutions to very meaningful problems. And I think this kind of climate crisis that we're in, alongside this confluence of new government regulation, new business commitments for net zero, and a change amongst consumers and their approach to how they want to live their lives, enables us now really to drive systemic change in a way we've not seen before. So I love investing in and working with very early stage teams. There is a sort of Cambrian explosion of early stage founders now wanting to tackle very hard scientific problems. And it's a pleasure to be able to provide as much advice and support to them as we are able to. We run a team of about 100 globally, making the best investments and trying to help operationally scale the companies in which we invest. And I guess I would side with Carlotta with one point, that I think for a long time there has been a risk that profit with purpose has been a slightly dirty phrase. And I think you're absolutely right. We're now at a tipping point where we've seen that returns from sustainable investments have outstripped other investments over the past 5 to 10 years. And as a result, there seems to be a tipping point of capital. The question now is, how can we deploy that at scale into the most ambitious entrepreneurs and give them the advice and support to help them scale solutions to the world's biggest problems?
Thank you, Henry. Mathieu, tell us a little bit about what you do and the fantastic organization that you're building.
First of all, I'd like to say hello to everybody. Thank you for having me tonight. A real pleasure to the panel of superstars. So maybe a little bit about myself, my background. So in Marseille, as you said before, I've been a professional football player for started my career in France and very quickly moved to UK, where I played 8 years for Arsenal, then 5 years over there. And at the age of 25, 26, I co-founded a company called GF biochemicals, and I became the CEO of the company. We are trying to address a very important problem, which maybe it is related to the petrochemical industry. Lately, we have a letter published by the International Energy Agency, which is highlighting the fact that one demand today is being generated by the petrochemical industry. And this moving quickly and hopefully quicker in the near future toward industry, meaning that there are two factors which are driving this industry to change, which is the EU or government, which are pushing out and phasing out all these dirty petrochemical products. And on the other side, you also have the consumers, people like you, requesting more sustainable and safer product. Because one aspect which is also, and something which maybe not everybody realizes, every single product we call consumer good product, going from shampoo, shower gel, the pens, the deodorant, most of those products are still today made of oil, meaning like petroleum product. And our company, so GF Biochemicals, what we are 12 years, is to very much bring solutions and bring safer and more to the market in order to improve the quality of life of the people. And for me, as I was saying, I grew up by the sea. My dad used to be a diver. I remember the very long plastic collect which we used to do, to have the opportunity for the past 12 years to participate in general effort to tackle climate change is for me like so thank you again to be here tonight.
Thank you for joining all experts on this panel. And so what we did here is that we brought to you, the audience, a panel that represents an investor in the investors, so an enabler. Then we have a venture supporter, Henry, who has first experience as a serial entrepreneur, and then went on to sort of support many of these ventures to come out and build. And then we have Mathieu, who is currently actively building a very successful company. So we have a daunting list of environmental crises, from climate change to ocean pollution, acidification, and impeding biodiversity loss. And as we are pushing the limits of our planet, you could so say, we are also looking for solutions by pushing the outermost edges of what's possible in science, technology, and in the tools that we have at hand. So what we would like to do in this session is to learn from the different perspectives, what are these tools? What are these tools from in each of these different industries that can help us to sort of tackle these different climate issues that we face? And it is a wicked problem, so there's no simple solution to. So we need these different perspectives to look at it. And that's maybe the first question that we would like to pose to the panel. And let's shake it up. We start with Henry, then we go with Mathieu, and then we go with Carlotta. What is it that we are missing at the moment? What could be done more? And particularly from your perspective and your field. But Anna, feel free to throw in some personal perspective there as well.
Sure, I'll probably give the blindingly obvious answer. I mean, I think it's there is a huge tidal wave of later stage capital available for businesses that have hit some scale with environmental impact. What's shocking to me is still the relative amount of very early stage seed and pre-seed capital that's available to early stage teams trying to tackle new innovative scientific and technology approaches to the climate crisis. And I think that's where I would like to see the biggest change. I think there is part government responsibility to do that. And I know JP Morgan and others are doing great fund-of-fund investments. I'd love to see them back earlier stage funds as well. I think there has been a historic feeling that some of the early stage scientific and technology companies in this space take too long to get to scale to fit with the standard returns profile for a venture fund. And I think that's disappointing. I think there are lots of different fund structures one can look at the moment where you have a longer life cycle. So the thing I would most like to see is a tidal wave of early stage capital being put to work.
Brilliant. Thank you for those insights. And I see that some of you in the audience have already understood the message that it is very much possible to ask questions that we will then pose to the audience, to the panelists. So if you're in the audience and you have a question and you're listening, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll put it to the panel. Mathieu, we would love to hear from you. What could we do more?
So first of all, I'd like to say that I'm very pleased that we need to allocate more investment, I would say, to early stage, because in the biotech field, I mean, timings, takes much longer. What the engineers forgot to tell me is like it takes a cycle of 10 years to bring a new molecule. So this is something which I've learned along the way. But what's important to all those new technology, even if they take some time to deliver, they give you the opportunity to, for the future. Meaning that we are replacing some ingredient manufactured for the past 40 years. It took us 10 years to be where we are today, and we are replacing molecule. Meaning that we position ourselves for the next, hopefully 10, 20 to founding. I'll take a small example about France. So the company is located in France, system which is very attractive for R&D, research and development, meaning that we invest into R&D. I mean, the government is through very much. But let's take the example, once you have developed your technology, let's say it takes 5, then you move from what we call, technology which you have proven, you then need to prove at industrial scale. And most of the time we call like, not the pilot, let's say your first industrial plant. And for many years in France, company didn't have access to funding, because on one side you had maybe some like courageous enough to support those company, and on the other side, government were not supporting those new. Has changed, okay. What has changed is now you have, more, I would say, capital, okay, for those type of industries. You also have the government, BPI, or like some kind of entities which are supporting the technology lab to industrial scale. And this is also very appealing, not only because sometimes we have the tendency to forget that we are going through what I call like economic war. Today, you have technology being developed in Europe, which are in US, doing the scale up in Asia. So if government is today, are allocating more money, I would say, like to support those technology from a lab demonstration to a first plant, like industrial approach, missing for many years, and which we see more capitals being invested and giving the opportunity for new technology coming out on the market to be developed, at scale.
Thank you, Mathieu. And I think we can all agree with that. As we see as well, the first questions pouring in, we can clearly see that this is a question and a challenge that is very vividly experienced all around the globe, because we got currently people from South Africa, Chile, Malta, Ghana, Germany, Cairo, and of course close to home, London, who are posting questions. So keep them coming. And as we go now to Carlotta to learn more about what we could do more from the financial perspective.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like a broken record here, because I have to agree with both Henry and Mathieu, because I think really the key challenge for me is how it's quantum. I think that I think we need a lot more capital going into the space a lot faster. And I'm sure that these are statistics that the entire audience is very familiar with. But the climate policy initiatives estimates that between 4.5 and 6 trillion per year are required to meet climate objectives. And there are other statistics and numbers out there, depending on the assumptions you make, depending on the time frame and what you include. But I think the basic point is that we need current climate finance flows to accelerate at an unprecedented speed from the, depending on which numbers you read, between 600 billion and 1 trillion that we have today, to those numbers that we need. And just for reference, that's kind of what the current climate finance flows that we have today are. They're roughly equivalent to the annual spend of US e-commerce. So that really puts things in perspective. And I think we are going back to that inflection point. I spent my career in development finance institutions at the World Bank, at the African Development Bank, and then at the British International Investments. And there, I think it was really these organizations that paved the way for the growth of this climate finance. And now it's really up to all capital allocators come together to start doing that in earnest.
Thank you for that perspective, Carlotta. And Tom, I believe you have got the next question for our panel.
Well, I have a few questions for each individually, Chris, if I may. So I'm going to stick with Carlotta for a second. And Carlotta, I was just curious, you mentioned, and I think quite a few people agreed, that purpose and profit align at the moment. And the question is, are we expecting that to continue? And this is an important question because it speaks to the way in which capital, the terms on which capital may or may not move into this space. So what's your view on that? What would we do if purpose and profit temporarily or no longer align?
It's a really good question. And I think I disagree with the fact that it's here temporarily. I think that I am a firm believer in the fact that profit and purpose are one and the same. And I think that in addition to that having been my personal belief for a long time, I think that there is now a number of disruptive forces that are happening globally that are forcing that into place. So there is a combination of climate change, but also changing consumer habits and preferences, as Mathieu was mentioning earlier, in terms of the kind of products we want to buy. And then in addition to that, which I don't think has ever happened before to the same scale, regulation is coming in to mandate profit and purpose to be joined. It's going to take some time still, and I think we're at the beginning of it. But what we're seeing is very much of the beginning of a carrot and sticks approach, where on the one hand you have, as I just mentioned, regulation coming in and mandating certain things into place, and on the other hand there's the carrots, right? So we have seen, there was Davos a few weeks ago, and we saw the on the one hand the US trying to woo climate businesses and clean tech entrepreneurs to re-domicile in the US, while at the same time both the German and the French leaders were speaking of the need for European businesses to catch up with the US and China lest they be left behind. And so I don't think that there is any other area today where you see the US and China and Europe kind of all driving in the same direction. So I think this is not temporary.
Right, thank you, Carlotta. So that makes sense. So you're pointing to a number of secular trends ranging from broader societal trends, technological trends, regulatory trends, all keeping that purpose and profit aligned. Now, one thing is, of course, to raise the quantum of finance that becomes available. Another challenge is to make sure that finance is channeled in the right direction. And Henry, here I have a question for you. So a common understanding is that a lot of the technical and scientific expertise needed to at least resolve the climate challenge is already out there, but there is a massive problem bringing that into a commercial format and then scaling it up. How do you pick the technologies and the business models that you choose to invest in, given that very turbulent societal and economical context?
Yeah, that is a very big question to try to answer in a short time frame. But I think that look, the fundamentals behind any of the investments that people try to make with a venture lens in this space are largely based on trying to identify genuine scientific breakthroughs where there is some form of defensibility around that science, where there is a clear, proven understanding of, at least in theory, how a technology can enable that scientific breakthrough to hit a supralinear scale, and where you are playing with some form of regulatory or consumer change tailwind to be able to make a very large impact in hopefully big markets. Now, it's easy to say that. It's obviously very difficult to find all of those things in individual founding teams. What I would say is we constantly are amazed by the number of new scientific breakthroughs that we see. And while it's quite easy, I think, sometimes to sit back and believe that the science already exists and we are just in how do we scale up that science to be commercial and successful, I do have a firmer belief that there is many more scientific breakthroughs that will come in the next 5 to 10 years that will be able to exploit for the benefit of society and the planet. So I think the fundamentals of making investments have to be similar across any kind of venture fund, whether they're focused on sustainable technologies or deep science or deep tech, or whether they're focused on consumer technologies. I think the catch comes over the period of time in which you're expecting the return. And I think the important thing to understand is that although the cycle for returns in this particular space may be longer than in other sectors, the scale of those returns over that time period may be absolutely outsized.
Right. Thank you so much, Henry. And I think, that really speaks to the complexity of operating in this field. I mean, your team must have quite a wide array of expertise and bring that all together from science to, really in-depth market analysis to just, pure business models. And that brings me to my question for Mathieu, because Mathieu, you went into the business in 2008, very early on, before climate change was a mainstream social issue. How did you identify an opportunity this specific so early on? What was the process that led you to the founding of this company?
Maybe I'd like to add a few. I was saying, I think, the purpose is gonna become the norm. I think we have seen over the past few months, few years, is like with it and fighting for the futures. Those people are going to be the consumers of tomorrow. New desires. They are requesting, like, I would say, safer, and the large, I would say, company out there, FMCG company, are taking some very important commitment. When I hear L'Oréal, committing by 2030, they want to use like more bio-based product. Those are huge, large companies going to be accountable for those commitments. So I think it is changing. Is it changing quickly enough? This I'm not sure. Obviously, we are hoping it becomes more and more active. He's taking the lead, but enough. So this is one aspect. The second aspect is, this is a very good question. The first aspect is, as I was saying, it started from a passion. At a young age, I was quite aware of the impact of I would say of the chemical on nature, because as I was saying, I remember like collecting, the very long collect of plastic on the beach, of like watching Commandant Cousteau, which was an adventurer. I always wanted to do something in that field. It was my way of challenge myself intellectually to be able to follow a passion. And I remember at the age of 25, those people at the time were all 60, 65 years old, young, with a strong desire to challenge themselves, and this is how we decided to move toward that time. It was very difficult to engage with a large multinational. I mean, talking about sustainability, bringing bio-based material and substitute they have been producing for the past 50 years, where was not even an option. But looking at the regulator, looking at the pressure coming from the consumers, requesting safer and more, is becoming more and more, I would say, like easy to engage with them, because we are replacing silicon. If you take silicon is a product which you find in everyday. You're finding it also like in deodorant. And silicon for the small store, meaning when you take a shower, you're using a shampoo using silicon, this silicon end up in a way. So the EU has passed a new regulation saying that by 2024, silicon has to be replaced. Okay, so for everyone out there, deodorant, it is a necessity to find a solution. So our product, the manufacturing today, are being used as a silicone replacement, because one, we're able to 80% because we use the biomass leftover from agriculture waste. Our product is biodegradable, so we bring a solution to the market. So as an idea, then it took us 10 years of development, because then you have to prove the concept in the lab, then you have to prove the concept at industry. That's done, you have to go through, I will say, a long certification process with your product to the market. And once you have done all that, you then have to convince, I mean, CG companies or large chemical companies, and your product is the right one because it has the right. What I like to say is, yes, we're in the field of deep tech, creating an app where you can have already a return on investment after 2, 3 or 4. Deep tech needs like investment upfront, need like a long term to develop, and once you're in for the next 40 years. This is a little bit the difference with like an app, but there is like a serious reward behind.
Thank you, Mathieu. And I would like to maybe follow up on that question and ask you a little bit about your career, because before you started this company, of course, you were a professional football player. From there on, you went to found this company and in biochemicals. Is there a metaphor to be made there that in order to tackle some of these issues, we need to reinvent ourselves? Do you believe that we need to push the boundaries of what we do, or can we continue business as usual and double down on some of the existing capabilities that we have? And I would like to maybe after Mathieu as well ask Lotta the same question regarding her industry. I believe we briefly lost Mathieu, so we go over to Carlotta. Carlotta, for you, basically the same question. Because impact is now a very fashionable topic, and is it just a reframing of business as usual, or are we sort of reinventing ourselves and finding new ways to tackle some of the problems that are out there?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think I think that it's not necessarily a reinvention, but a maturation. I think that it takes a while for things to become mainstream. And again, I think I mentioned earlier, I spent my career before JP Morgan in development finance institutions. So this is not something that is new, but it's something that took a very long time to mature. And we are still seeing that today. If you think about some of the debates on, what is happening in terms of regulation against greenwashing and what sustainability objectives means. And I think you're seeing also a lot of debate. As you said, impact is very fashionable, but it's also become very politicized. And some of the criticism has been about the fact that, again, indeed, greenwashing, anybody can say that they're having impact, but how do you measure it? How do you actually prove it? And I think that that's where we're still seeing that the industry has a long way to go. And there is some brilliant minds that are working on this right now. There are more brilliant minds that are coming to the industry. And I think this is, a discussion that we have pretty much every day. How do you move from non-standard measurements and non-standard regulations to a place where we all have similar language to speak about impact the same way that we do about financial terminology like revenue and EBITDA.
So just to follow on that, are there any particular trends that you are especially excited about that you see happening at the moment?
There is, I think, tons of things that I'm very excited about. I think probably the one that I think what I talked about before in terms of this conflation of this perfect storm, if you will, of finally the urgency of climate and social crisis coming to the fore, and the pandemic obviously has helped accelerating that trend, together with a more mainstream interest about doing something about these problems. And what I am really excited about is the fact that this confluence of events is leading to talent coming to the space, and we're seeing it here today in this forum, right? So it's really, for me, what is powerful about finance is that you can. It's the ability really of private investments to allocate capital to its most efficient uses to create value. And the intersection of that and impact becomes a concrete outcome in terms of improving lives. And so if you think about getting the right set of incentives there, getting the right amount of capital there, getting the right returns there, what you get is talent comes to space, and then talent becomes key to unlock value in investing, and being able to do that at scale. I think it's key to solving some of our most pressing challenges.
So you mentioned there as well talent as one of the key points that we need to focus on. And Henry, the next question is for you, because talking about talent, you work on a daily basis with talent as trying to push the boundaries in terms of technical capabilities. Are there any particular trends that you see that you are especially excited about? And is there something where you say, well, this is particularly something that at Founders Factory you're focusing on or doubling down on in order to sort of push these limits a bit further?
Yeah, there are a huge amount of trends that we're obviously excited by the whole time, and without sort of drawing on the very, very obvious one, I think that the advances in machine learning that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years, and the impact that that's likely to have when it comes to advanced manufacturing techniques for creating synthetic metals, different types of synthetic chemicals, or new molecules, is likely to have a very, very opportune impact on the space. And I think that's an area where we have seen a huge amount of excitement in the early stage technical world. So that continues to be true. I have a huge range of areas that I think are exciting and still very productive for investment. I think we spend a lot of time thinking around seemingly quite mundane things, actually, like what's the most effective way to produce clean hydrogen. This is something that can have a huge impact, we feel. Electrification is kind of a known solution now to a problem, and has a number of different ways of tackling mass electrification. But I think production of green hydrogen is really likely to have a terrific impact. And there are a lot of very quite straightforward technologies actually that may impact that substantially. But I think above and everything else, the advances we've seen from a machine learning perspective are likely to have the biggest impact in the next 5 to 10 years.
And then maybe to think a little bit further along that line that you set out there, when we sort of apply machine learning to climate tech or to sustainability, is it inherently different, or is there a sort of trend that we can see that where you say, well, actually, it's just the obvious next step that we then as well apply these technologies to climate, or do you say it's actually a entire different sort of field that we can focus on?
I think it's an entirely different speed that we can focus on right now. So I think that what we've seen with generative models now in AI, the speed with which you can get to the design of different molecules and different proteins and many, many different types of physical elements is really going to have a huge impact, because it takes away the need for a very lengthy time-based R&D exploration. And I think the impact of that is going to be very dramatic. Yes. So I do think we are at a tipping point where a generative AI will have an extreme impact in that world of biotech and synthetic chemistry.
Thank you for that, Henry. So Mathieu, the question that we posed as well to the other speakers is that, and we took basically your career a little bit as an example of that, where you started as a professional football player and then you reinvented yourself into an entrepreneur, motivated by seeing what happens around climate. So around the idea of reinvention, tipping points, and inflection, is there any particular trend that you see or any particular tendency where we really sort of need to jump onto and where we may have to push the boundaries of our current capabilities and possibly have to reinvent ourselves in ways that we can address that? Is it something you see in your field, maybe you personally, or even your organization?
Interesting quote which says evolution, not revolution, to swift it and say, like, I mean, we don't have the time to, I mean, like, it's more about revolution and not evolution. I mean, the reality is, like, we are facing it, okay, and we have been talking about it for many years now, but the rate to act in 50 years, I mean, not sure, I mean, how the planet will be and how will be the condition of life. Okay, so I personally believe, I mean, the way we do business, how we manufacture, and how do we, like, the business today has to change. I mean, we cannot simply continue like which end up in the sea, or consumer goods which having like a negative impact on people. Nobody can escape it. We all live in big cities, handling millions of people every year. So even if we say we are privileged people, such person today cannot escape pollution, plastic in the sea. Today you have every single fish, every fish which we are extracting out of the sea is microplastic inside. So the main question is, I mean, in here's an Total, Shell, BP, this year are the largest or the highest profit ever. I mean, should we continue like that? So I personally believe, I don't know if it's about but I think we have to change the fundamentals, meaning that what we have been doing until now, it's simply not sustainable anymore. Okay, and I think like is a polluter or whoever has had a negative impact. I mean, I personally believe more than evolution, it has to be a revolution. I think to see that on the financial side, I mean, like right now there is a massive thing, and which is backing, I would say, like purpose-driven businesses, purpose. And as I was saying before, I'm an optimistic person, and it's a beginning.
Yeah, thank you for that. And clearly you walk the talk because you're building an organization that very much addresses that. So building further on that, what is your big idea for the future? What can we expect next? What is that you're working on? If we all like to dream big, but what is it for you that really sort of that you would like to make happen?
So I'm a dreamer, so I have many dreams, but personally, like very, very proud to be where I am today. As I always say, I have a very I don't have any chemical background. I studied law for a short period of time, and I became like very quickly. So we have completed a round of investment of 15 million, led by Sofinova, which is probably one of the experts, like in deep. I'm extending the team, meaning like bringing like talent to the team, and we're going to launch like a new R&D facility in the south of France in April, hoping to also like announce a new facility, our bio-based material in Europe. So we are growing rapidly. We see ourselves in the next few years, hopefully bringing and more, I will say, like sustainable consumer good to the market. And what I like to say is, like the Intel is to the micro, the Gore-Tex is like to outdoor clothing. Maybe one day, Jeff, biochemicals when it comes to biomaterial. So working hard for a month ago. This is again like a new challenge. This is not an easy task. Good, hopefully to perform on the field, but to be a good CEO, a lot of learnings, and I'm trying to surround myself from the right people, and it's a new experience. So not an easy task, but I'm giving it committed, and it is a real passion. So hopefully,
Thank you. And I know for a fact that there's many scientists as well on the call that are thinking to start the same way you did, working on their venture alongside their jobs, in the hope to one day sort of push it out and join Henry at Founders Factory in order to build these companies further. Mathieu, we're very well aware that you're needed as well elsewhere at the moment. So we would like to thank you very much for joining us today. And before anyone thinks that he's going to play the second half of the derby against Manchester City, he's actually meeting the ambassador. So thank you for being with us, Mathieu, and making the time and be here. We'll continue with the other speakers because we're very curious to learn about their big idea for the future. So Henry, talking about big ideas, and it seems like that big ideas are not strange to you. You've been building you've been supporting many talents with big ideas. So if we stay on the topic of big ideas, what is the big idea that we can expect from you in the future?
Well, I'm going to come to that in a second, but one thing I would say is I think a great big idea for all of us would be to help find more leaders like Mathieu, who can be humble and charming whilst building generational defining businesses. I think there's a slight lack of that in the world at the moment, so it's been great to share a panel with them. I think everybody will have enjoyed that. I've mentioned one area where we're very focused at the moment, so how you can link cost-effective production of green hydrogen and link that with industrial processes. I think there is a really massive opportunity there to tackle climate change in a slightly different way to how other people have thought about it. So that's an area that I find very exciting. I think, I'll touch on two quick other areas. I think food waste. I think there is an enormous amount of opportunity with better insight and demand prediction from machine learning to be able to affect more sustainable food production and lower food waste. We do that. We look at that through a lens of machine learning and robotic production. I think that's somewhere where we find that a very interesting space to be looking at. And I think that the other area that I've have become very interested in recently is thinking around air cargo transport. So we have an investment into a company based out of Bulgaria, actually, that we're very excited by at the moment, that is bringing low-cost drone technology to longer distance air freight and cargo, and reducing emissions by 60 to 70% and reducing cost by 10x. So I think those are three areas where we can have very, very, very tangible impact on the environment, and they're ones that I'm excited by.
Thank you for that, Henry. And just to get a bit of a sense, is this sort of something that is very sort of UK centric, or is this also something that people can engage with around the world? Because just to give you a bit of idea, we have about, just looking at the chat, about 15 different countries already engaging.
From a personal point of view, I mean, I'll do my selfish plug for Founders Factory and all the funds we operate. We invest globally. We are hugely excited to have a very big dedicated team. We've built and scaled 100 businesses in sub-Saharan Africa over the last few years. We've built and scaled 300 across Europe and North America. We're in Asia as well. Our big idea as Founders Factory is to help enable any entrepreneur, whatever their background, their experience, their network, or their geography, to build a very successful innovation in technology and turn that into a scalable company. So for people listening, our support is always available. We are here to try to champion entrepreneurship and innovation in all its forms, but ideally those technologies that are planet positive and have tangible impact for society.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Tom, over to you.
So Chris, I was very keen to hear Carlotta's big idea too. But Carlotta, before we get there, I just know, and I see this from the chat too, there are many people who are watching, who are working in finance, want to move into sustainable finance. And just before we get to your big idea, I mean, you're out there, you're doing it, you're also walking the walk. What is it that people need to understand? How can they train themselves if they want to join you at the frontier of sustainable finance practice?
First of all, it's amazing to hear, because I think that's, going back to my earlier point, I think we just need a lot of talent in addition to all the capital that we need. And so getting more talent into the space is fantastic. And I think that there is more and more opportunities. From a training perspective, I think, there isn't any, the basic skill sets of financial analysis stand true in any financial or any investment career. And that's really the focus. When it comes to sustainability, there is still a lot of innovation that is happening. So we have some basic frameworks, some initial thinking, some and then more and more, obviously, as we talked about before, regulatory frameworks as well. But so really, we are at the point where we need a lot more rigor, I think, around how do we develop a common set of standards in the impact industry as well. So please come and join forces with us. And
thank you, Carlotta.
Tom, you asked me about my big idea as well, I think, right?
Exactly right. I was going to get there. What will people do when they join you? When they join forces? What's the big idea to chase?
Well, the big idea, I'm afraid that I'm not sure. If this sounds very cheesy, but really, like, the one thing that I would love to see is this big coalition of architects of change, which includes exactly what we have around the table today, right? You need all hands on deck. And it's, I think to your earlier point, Henry, I think that the landscape is changing away from just investing in the late stage businesses to we're really seeing some incredible innovation coming through. We're seeing this joining of, continuing to invest in existing technology and applying advanced computational techniques to big problems and having this breakthrough innovation that is allowing us to see the light for 2030. And so really, I think that it becomes a question of getting business leaders, CEOs, academics, regulators. Everybody needs to be on board and looking in the same direction. And I think that that's happening more and more. I just want this to be bigger. I want more people and more capital to go towards this as quickly as possible.
Yes, thank you for that, Carlotta. And it sounds like that we need to have more conversations like this. We need to bring more people together and have this sort of spark that hopefully leads to further development of ideas, capital, talent, in order to push the momentum even further on this. And I can tell as well from the audience that many people are very engaged with this topic and would like to understand better what they can do and how they can engage and how they can reinvent themselves in order to push the boundaries further. Having said that, an hour like this goes very quick, especially with a panel like this, and we are very grateful for all of you being with us today. So thank you very much to the panelists, to Mathieu, Henry, Carlotta, for being with us today, sharing your expertise, your perspective, and telling us a little bit more and shining a little bit more light on the important work that you do. But also listening to you, it's very clear that we're not quite there yet, and more can be done, and we are doing more. So if you enjoyed this conversation, if you're listening, if you're tuning in from around the globe, we'll be hosting more of these sessions. So do join us. Do find us online. Do check out the panelists as well and the important work they do and the organizations that they are part of, in order to see how you may tag along and support. Big thank you as well to Tom for being here and giving the backbone of knowledge of this of us as hosts. We're very grateful for having you and your insights here with us today. So this is normally where you would get the big applause, the big thank you. It's always a little bit awkward online, but this is where you would get it, and I'm very sure that everybody agrees that's listening. So spread the word and come join us next time. Thank you all for being with us today and have a great evening.
Thank you.